Well, we are very fortunate tonight. First, I would like to acknowledge Jenna Waldinger, who is a County Office of Education board member. And in addition to her regular board member duties, she always looks out for topics that she thinks would be of great interest to the community, and clearly you hit a home run tonight. Dr. Morlar has been doing lectures and thinking and writing about emotions and how to deal with them for years, and apparently took some time to write some books that you can see up there that have won major awards, so we have quite an expert on the topic. I was asking him earlier, is there anything that you'd like me to say in introducing you that isn't on the announcement that you all read? And he said, integrity. That's a piece that I brought to the whole topic about emotions and understanding emotions. And so I'm not quite sure what that's going to mean in the discussion, but I'm going to be quiet so that you can hear him. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ed Morlar.
You got to turn this on, right? Am I on? Thank you, Barbara. Now I'm turned on. Is it okay? Beautiful. Okay, good. Now, Barbara and Shauna are the ones responsible for coordinating this, and Jana brought me here. So you understand that if this turns out to be a bomb, I'm not responsible, they are, right? Okay. Now, apparently this is a fairly large turnout. I have some friends myself who I asked to join here, but the majority is people I don't know at all. So I'm kind of wondering, what was it about this topic? Now, I've done a lot of corporate workshops, and I've never had a canned presentation. I don't have a canned presentation today, because this whole topic is so broad and diverse. But I know I'm going to cover certain points, but how I cover them, how much time I spend on any point, and in what order, depends on what I sense the audience needs and wants. So in order to help me tailor this for your benefit, so you can maximize your time here, optimize your time here, if anybody would care to share with me that topic, understanding emotions, attitudes, and behaviors, what was it that you wanted out of this? Yes?
We have an 11-year-old going on, I don't know what, and she's become a senorita, so she's got all the emotions, the hormones that she doesn't know what to do with.
Right.
And we don't quite know how to handle them.
Okay. Good. Anybody else? Yes.
I'm a parent of a 4-year-old almost, and I grew up in a household where emotions were not permitted. You had to stifle everything. And
right.
So having opened up from being shut down, I want to access as much power around that so I can give him the opportunity to
Good.
live.
Yes, sir.
We're parents of a 2.5-year-old, and we got no certification before we brought a child in this world. We're a little bit befuddled by her development and how we can best support her development and nurture.
Okay, good. Yes, sir.
We're parents of a 6-year-old and a 2.5-year-old as well. She's going through terrible things. And the 6-year-old is trying to cope with kindergarten. In preschool, they told him to let his emotions flow, and now in kindergarten, they're telling him that he has to put a cap on his emotions. So,
who's telling him that? The teachers? Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
I have a 9-year-old boy who looks right at me and tells me no. Right at me, and it's almost like he smiles out of one side of his mouth and is serious out of the other, and tries to decide which way he's going to go with his own emotion, and I just pounce like a tiger does.
So, okay, so what we're seeing here is, you know, there's a difference between responding and reacting. And what I'm hearing is we're having frustrations because there's a lot of reaction, which means you're the victim of this 4-year-old, 2-year-old, 14-year-old, or whatever it is, and you don't know how to handle it, so you get angry, you get frustrated, right? All those things happen. So, so let's step back. Did you have a question?
Well, it's related to all this because I've been reading about emotional reactivity, and that's something that I've been trying to focus on my own emotions. You know, like when I have a 4.5-year-old son, and sometimes I react to whatever he's doing. So I'm trying to focus on my own, emotions.
Right.
So I'm learning, and sometimes I can catch myself, but not all the time.
Right,
so,
right.
So I just.
Right. So you want to be more responsive and less reactive. You want to act more mature. You want to act more like an adult instead of a reactive little kid, right? Okay. In fact, most of the world, most of the people you know, when they get under pressure, how do they react? Like what? Like children and adolescents. They're only in their bigger bodies, right? Because one of the things I wanted to cover with you is take a look at the underlying dynamics of what creates those emotions, those reactions or responses. You would like to be more responsive, more responsible. Instead of going like this, you want to say, oh, how do I need to handle it with the resources I have? Limited as they may be, how can I optimize those resources? With whatever situation and whatever age group you're dealing with, including those children and adolescents in 50-year-old bodies that you have to deal with, right? And the problem that we have in the world here, as I see it, is we've got a whole bunch of those adolescents and children in older bodies reacting all over the place, creating insanity. So let me tell you my little story. I'm from the Midwest, and you know how Midwesterners are kind of solid, dependable, conservative. Their meat's always overdone, and their vegetable, they haven't heard of the word al dente. And generally, they're kind of boring, you know. That's where I come from. And I was in the Navy, and then I went to graduate school, and I got out of graduate school, and I got a job with a consulting company, and I was a consultant before I even know what a consultant was. And I had a good mentor, so I did fairly well, and all of a sudden I got an offer to take me to Washington, D.C. It was a nice promotion, tripled my salary. I had a big staff, big budget, and I spent about 6 months doing a whole analysis, and I said, I can get this place turned around in less than a year. And they said, wait a second, you don't understand. This is an impossible situation. Just keep us out of trouble. Don't let us get embarrassed. That's all we ask. You can have this job the rest of your life if you want, because it's chaotic and it's political and it's all that sort of stuff. And I said, okay. So I went in and I did my little cost-benefit analysis, and I went in there and I said, well, we can invest $50,000 in equipment in the print department, which was under me, and we wound up saving $50,000 a week by doing that. So I thought I had some statistics and credentials, and I did that in a number of situations. Then I started asking for other things of a similar nature, and the reactions were crazy. They didn't make any sense at all to me. And I said, well, you know, I'm from the Midwest. I'm not very sophisticated in Washington politics. I just don't understand this stuff, so I better take some psychology courses. So I was living in Maryland, while working in Washington, living in Maryland. College Park is right away, beautiful campus. So I started taking a psychology course, sociology course, some education courses. How do I educate these people and starting to doing some sane things, some relatively sane things? So I took a bunch of courses, and what I was looking for, well, what was the cause of this insanity? I went there to understand insanity. I didn't understand insanity. Do you understand insanity? I didn't understand it either. So I wanted to find out what causes insanity. What causes this irrational behavior? So I took all these courses and went through this whole batch of courses, and guess what? They labeled a bunch of things. So I get through and I said, well, you labeled them, that's nice, maybe that's helpful, but I wanted to understand the course. Well, that's the next phase. So I say, okay, I'll take the next phase. So in the next phase, they taught you a bunch of techniques and interventions, which can be helpful at times. I said, but that's fixing symptoms. I see that all the time. That's all the government does, is fix symptoms. And that's all the medical profession does, is fix symptoms. Because why? Because there's a lot of money in it, right? If you fix the cause of a disease, what happens to those pharmaceutical companies? So there's a tendency to stay with fixing symptoms. And we'll get back to that later. But so I went in and I said, well, that's fixing symptoms. Some of that's interesting. Short-term wise, that can be very helpful. And that's great. But I came here to understand what caused this stuff. And they kept saying, well, it's the next level, the next level, the next level. Well, I went through, I got a PhD, and guess what? I never learned how to handle the cause or understand the cause. And I was embarrassed. I had a PhD. Nobody knew it for 5 years. Because I felt dishonest. I hadn't learned some basic I had a bunch of techniques, interventions, all mechanics, all superficial. And I said, got to get down to the basics if you're going to do anything. So I spent the next 30 years, you name it, I took it, whether it was courses, workshops, the whole range, conservative, all the way, anything, religious, metaphysical, I checked it out. Because I wanted to understand causes. And I think I learned a few things. And in that process, I said, if we can look at emotions and understand emotions, because I realized that emotions create your attitudes. And they create your beliefs. And they create your behaviors. And actually, beliefs are fundamental. And guess where those are caused? What creates those beliefs? Where do you get beliefs? Who had the 3-year-old? 3.5-year-old? 2.5. Critical stage. Why? Because it's around 3 that they're out of their totally independent, I'm going to find out what the world is, totally that self-centered, all about themselves. And by the age 3, we start to learn from society, from our parents, because they learn that way. Here's the way you're supposed to behave, in this way. So we start creating these conditions, and all conditions are limiting. And they create beliefs around those conditions. And all beliefs are limiting. I don't care how big the belief is. If you believe A, it excludes B. So we start limiting people in how they can behave, the shoulds and oughts of the world, which is a huge control mechanism. Why? Because we don't know any better? Because it's inconvenient to let them go wild? So at age 3 is a really important part to say, what can I do to allow that creativity that they were demonstrating? There was a pain in the rear end in the terrible 2s, but they were being creative in their reach. What's this wonderful thing? I want to smash that, and just for the experience. It's just about gaining more experiences, but we got to stop that because it's inconvenient, because it doesn't fit some kind of social norm. Whatever, it's a religious norm, social norm, familiar norm, whatever. You got all these limits we start placing on people, and they start believing I can't do certain things. The more limits you put on, the more you've got I can't do. So you create a whole belief system that I can't do. And you believe it. So guess what? There's whole areas you are teaching them, and you have learned and been taught that you can't do. Right? Now, what do they say? Psychology, I'm one of those guys. They say we use less than what? What figure have you heard? 10%, 5% of our potential. It's probably 1/10 of 1% or less. You are incredible beings with incredible possibilities that you have believed you are not anywhere near that. You've been putting yourself down, and you've learned that, and that's the norm, and that's what you're doing with your kids. And it's understandable. Doesn't make it bad. This is not about good or bad. That's a subjective evaluation. We're just looking at a certain dynamic. So let's take a look at, for a moment here, different levels of where people are. Let's say, let's use the word winner. And that can be pejorative too, when winner in a financial sense. Let's keep it in a broad, almost spiritual sense. What are those qualities and characteristics that you would like to see in your child, that you would like to have been instilled in yourself? What are the qualities and characteristics of winning in the broadest, biggest, most loving sense? I didn't hear it. Integrity. I love that word. Okay. What else? Let me turn up my hearing aid here. All right, let me try. Yes. Confidence. Okay. Responsibility. Freedom. Critical thinker. Yeah, let's look at it in that sense, because, Eichmann was persevering too, So you got to qualify some of these things. Persevere, what's the intention? What's the value behind the quality? Compassion. Certainly compassion. What else? I'm sorry?
Respect for self and others.
Respect, right. Respect for self and other. Honoring others.
Kind.
Again?
Kind.
Kindness.
Tolerance.
K-I-N-D, and tolerance. Say again? Curiosity. Say again?
Productiveness.
What does that mean?
That means you don't sit on your butt and you actually do something.
Okay, so, but again, within the value system of something positive, loving, contributing to the world beyond yourself.
Contributory? Contributory?
Okay, let's make sure we got a positive on that. I mean, like I said, Eichmann had his contributions, okay? Okay, we got more. Allowance, gratitude, those kind of qualities.
Put me with Eichmann.
Yeah. No, my apologies. Okay, so how would you like to be married to somebody with all those qualities in spades? How would you like to be working for somebody with all those qualities? How would you like to have a whole bunch of people working for you with those qualities, right? Okay, let's just kind of label these the winners of life. Okay, and let's just go down here a little bit. What are the qualities of people that don't have those qualities? What do they do? How do they behave? They're blamers, yes. Arrogant. Pardon me? Selfish. Manipulative. Insensitive. Okay. I won't argue with you. What else? Hurtful. Hurtful. Okay. Any others? Dishonest, definitely. Dishonest. Is honest up here? I put it up here. Untrustworthy. Fearful. Now there we're talking about a chronic quality, because there's nothing wrong with fear. I'm gonna look at what are real emotions and synthetic emotions. Real emotions always have both positive and negative potentials, because they're messages. Emotions are messages from our unconscious that we created to give us some sense, some measurement of how we're doing so we can self-correct. But if we don't listen to those messages, we say we don't like those ones, because we put all these subjective values on, like I don't like grief, I don't like apathy, I don't like fear. So I'm going to numb those out. How many of you have ever numbed out fear, just kind of ignored it, or suppressed your anger? So you just went covertly hostile, got more manipulative. So we do all these things rather than just realizing emotions aren't good or bad. Those are subjective evaluations we tack on. They just are, and they're just messages giving us feedback on how well we're doing. Fear, what's the positive side of fear? Pardon me? Well, how? Well, it says there's some possible danger. I need to slow down here and really be present and observe what's going on. Right? That's a survival mechanism. It slows. Too much of it does what? Paralyzes us. Okay, so it's like everything. Where's balance? When we look at the world today, it's out of balance in so many different ways. So many things are ignored, so they go out of balance. So it's about looking at these dynamics. So my purpose today is to at least introduce you to the dynamics of emotions and what they relate to, because you see life through your emotions. All right? Yes? Yes? If you're angry, you see life differently. Circumstance outside there, it's the same. But when you're angry, you see differently than when you're in grief. You see life differently. Same thing, you see it differently than when you're cheerful. You see life differently, et cetera, et cetera. We see life through our emotions, and we develop attitudes about what this means and how important this is through the emotion we're in. And we go up and down on these emotions. So it would be helpful to us to understand what emotions are, their messages, and how they relate to one another, so which is more dangerous in the sense that we need to really be aware of it because we're putting ourselves in jeopardy. Any of you ever feel insecure? Raise your hand. Okay, all that's saying is, hey, I need to take a look. At what? We're going to take a look at those dynamics. So let's go a little farther. So we got winners and losers. That's pretty gross, isn't it? Winners and losers. Let's get a little more subtle here. Let's get subtle. So we got, let's say this is the dividing line. And let's say, divide this up into 4 quadrants. 1, 2, 3, 4. And here's the winners with those qualities we just mentioned. And here's people, they're above the line, they're winning more than they're losing, but not quite as much. Okay? And here's people, they're losing, but not quite as much as these deadbeats down here. Right? So let's take this arrow and say that represents how the dynamic we have in our survival in life and dealing with life and becoming a winner, a real winner, not just by somebody else's standards, by your standard of how you're feeling good and contributing to the world. You're a person of integrity. You're a person of compassion. You're a loving being. You think beyond yourself. You know you're important because you contribute to a world that needs you to contribute in a positive way. And if you don't, you're contributing to a negative. You're contributing negatively to that world of which you're a part, which means you're hurting yourself. So it'd be stupid and insane to be doing hurtful things to anybody else. We forget that sometimes. We get very selfish and self-centered. We take care of ourselves, and we get, so we're going to look at where that is and what you need to be aware of. So when somebody's got this kind of a survival dynamic, right, well, life comes in a little bit. Let's say we have a problem. Call it a problem in quotes here. Can everybody see that? Problem. It's a problem. What would be the attitude of somebody in this quadrant when something arises that somebody calls a problem? What's their attitude for that? It's a challenge and an opportunity. The attitude is, oh, wow, something else to learn and grow and expand from, develop new skills. Challenge as an opportunity. Okay, well, let's say that life comes in a little more, and we're still in the positive zone, but not quite as much. Same exact situation, only it's down in this zone. What's our attitude towards it? We'll solve it, we'll cope with it. We'll be a good soldier, we'll handle it, we'll be responsible. Not particularly creative, we'll get it out of the way, handle it. Life comes in a little bit more, and now we're right in the middle. Maybe I'll win, maybe I won't. That's associated with the emotion of antagonism, which means oppose. Don't bug me. I'm on this delicate line, and I'm doing okay, and I haven't fallen over yet. Don't give me any more problems. So anything, but boss, you just said for me to do this research, and your idea was wonderful. We can really do well, but you need to approve it right now. We're going to miss it. What's he going to say? It's starting to get a little nuts, right? Don't bug me. Well, so you bug him. You say, but boss, you're the guy. You said it. So you bug him, and finally you push him over the line. Where does he go? From antagonism, which is focused anger, to anger. I'm giving you some definition here. Anger, antagonism, focused hostility. Anger, generalized hostility. You're always doing that to me. Right? It gets exaggerated. An element of truth that gets exaggerated. Anytime we're below this line, things get exaggerated, including the truth. Truth gets embellished, which means what? It's untruthful then, right? This is where lies start coming in. Well, this range here isn't too socially acceptable in this conditioned world. As a 3-year-old, we've learned to really develop and get along. We got to get along, because if we don't get along, we'll be excluded and abandoned, and we'll be alone. Nobody wants to be alone, so we'll do anything to be acceptable. Right? So we've got this anger. It hasn't gone away. Still see, this is the hostile zone. The world's against us. It's coming in on us. We're not handling it, it's handling us. Hostile. So where do we move when we get that? When it's not cool, it's not cool to have this emotion on display. Maybe your real emotion, that doesn't matter in the society. You've got to suppress it to what? Not yet. You ever heard of passive-aggressive behavior? Covert. It's covert. See, we're hostile. Covertly hostile. We're suppressing it. We've got it, we stuff it, and we smile. How you doing? Fine. Why? Because it's right next to fear. We're going down, 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 down. We're more and more overwhelmed, and all of a sudden we get into fear. What is fear? It's a real emotion. What does fear tell you? It's a threat of some potential future loss. I might lose my $100,000 I invest in the stock market. I might lose my relationship. Some kind of fear, you're not handling life, it's handling you, and you go, I'm afraid I might lose. It's future. Fear is about the future. Potential loss in the future. When you lost it, whatever it is, the $100,000 in the stock market, the relationship, whatever it is, you go into grief, which is you've lost. That's grief. And you usually feel it physically in your chest. Most people do. There's an emptiness, a void. I'm missing something. It's gone. Okay. Life comes in a little bit more, and finally you say, there's nothing I can do about it. Apathy. Now, the important thing of this scale is that these emotions, these messages, are each separate, distinct messages. There's many more. But they have a relationship one to another. And for you to know when you're in one or when you're dealing with somebody who's in one of these, what's their degree of overwhelm? Right? You can get angry at your kid when he's angry, then who's in control? He's angry, so you get angry at him being angry. He's not supposed to be angry, so you get angry. Great modeling you do. So who's in control? Let me define control. Control is the ability to stop, change, or stop something, whatever it is, under your determinism. If you can stop, change, or stop it when you so choose, you're in control. If you can put on the brake on a car when you want to put a brake on the car and stop it, you're in control. If you put your foot on the brake and you can't stop it, you're not in control. It's either or. You're either in control or you're not. It's like you either have integrity or you don't. We'll talk about more of that later and how that relates to this. Okay. So, if you can understand where people are and their associated attitudes and behaviors at each level, does that give you a lot of predictive power? Both for understanding yourself, I'm really angry right now. What's that telling you? Well, I know I'm exaggerating because at anger you exaggerate. And you project out there. Because remember, responsibility was up here, irresponsibility was down here. So when you're in this lower quadrant, you're projecting responsibility out there. And you need to know you're doing that. Because then only when you take responsibility, change is what? Change only occurs. If you're a chronically angry person, you know somebody's a chronically angry person, and they're angry all the time. Why don't they change? Why don't they do something? Well, change is the universal constant, and they're not changing. There's something out here, right? They must be really resisting something. What are they resisting? They're resisting looking at what is. 4 steps to change. Might want to write this down. First step is to recognize what's going on. Whatever it is, good, bad, ugly, those are all subjective evaluations, good, bad, or ugly. Recognition of what is. What's going on here? What's the problem? Second step, own your piece of it. You're in the universe, you made some contribution, I don't care how small, you got a contribution to it.
It being the
Whatever it is, the situation. You contributed it, you either allowed it or created it to some degree. They may be the dastardly people that are really contributed, they're the Hitlers of the world and all that sort of stuff. Somehow you allowed it. What can you take a look at and say, where am I responsible? How can I be more responsible so this doesn't happen again? It's about being responsible. It's about personal ownership. You're part of the universe, you contribute. You do have an impact. Own your power. If you don't own your impact, you are powerless. You are disempowering yourself. Okay? Third step, forgive yourself. Often this is the toughest. If you don't go through those 3 steps, you won't change. You won't change. You got to recognize the problem. You got to own your contribution to it, no matter how much small, big or small. The size has got nothing to do with it. It's all about ownership. That's the empowering aspect. You got to forgive yourself. I can't forgive myself. I'm such a bad person. No, that's a control mechanism to get somebody else's sympathy. You're still in manipulation there. Just stop it. Guess what the 4th step is? Guess. We're talking about change here, folks. Do something different. Right? It may not be the perfect thing, but a issue you're getting into action. In a responsible action. Try it. If it doesn't work, try something else. But you got to go through those 3 steps to even get there, or you're going to be BSing yourself and all your spouse and everybody else about how you're taking action in that. Yes, sir.
You said, what's their degree of overwhelm? When you're looking at people's reaction, it sounds pregnant and I didn't quite get it.
I'm not sure what sounds pregnant.
To be able to say what is somebody's degree of overwhelm, I don't know what you're looking at.
Well, there's degree and then there's intensity. Okay, we can have things that are very intense. But whenever you're below this line, the degree, the lower you are in this scale, that's why understanding the hierarchy of these emotions, the order of them, will tell you what degree of overwhelm you're in. When you're in apathy, there's nothing I can do about it. That's pretty overwhelming. If I can get somebody from apathy into really feeling sorry for themselves, that's progress. I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding you. I mean, I've done some consulting with suicide hotlines. And the biggest thing I tell them, man, if this guy's down here in apathy, do whatever you can. I mean, we don't want him crying. Yeah, we want him crying. At least he's feeling something. He doesn't feel anything. Why bother living? I can't feel anything anyway. Get him into some feeling. And it has to go through this. This is a gradient. You went down this way, you go up this way. You don't skip these things. You can go through them fast or slow, but you go through them. It's called life. It's just your measurement of life. So there's all these characteristics of these things which you can learn. They're in a book. I wrote it. Now, there's a very interesting and, to me, incredibly powerful correlation between these levels as you move up, because we'll talk about how to facilitate something up and going up in gradients, but there's levels of maturity. This is, when you're chronically down here, this is immature behavior. This is childish, adolescent, irresponsible, self-centered behavior. This is blame, projections, all that sort of stuff, irresponsibility. As you move up, it's increasing levels of responsibility, increasing levels of empowerment. So if you're children, what do you want to do? You don't want to suppress that grief, right? Let them express it. Because if you suppress whatever it is down here because it's uncomfortable for you, you just stuff it. Guess what? It doesn't go away, it just goes underground. And you've created a dysfunctional child who becomes eventually a dysfunctional adult who creates wars and has a few holocausts and throws a few things in like that. And that's this insane world. It lacks integrity, which means wholeness. Now, there's a direct correlation between integrity, your child's integrity, your friend's integrity, and where you are on the scale. Acutely, chronically. Even if you're acutely anywhere down here, you're not going to act with integrity. I don't care what your social BS is. You're out integrity. And integrity is binary. You either have it at any particular moment or you don't. You generally could be people of strong integrity, you really act well, but a little pressure comes in or something. Well, I don't know, I might lose my job if I say the right thing. That's a social political response. That's not an integral response. And you have just disempowered yourself. And you rationalize it till the cows come home. Well, I got to pay the mortgage. It's true, you got to pay the mortgage, and you disempowered yourself. So, and you do that chronically, what happens? See, it may be inconvenient acutely, but it's never inconvenient when you have integrity chronically. It's an inconvenience acutely, admittedly, but you're not willing to face the acute, short-term thing and willing to put up with a life of a disempowered life. And that's what you're training your kids to do, because they're modeling you. So we're talking about expanding awareness. So you can be more aware of the human dynamics. So once you're more aware of these dynamics, you can make choices and decisions that are more empowering to you and whoever you're with. So I've just found, because of that strong correlation, I got into this whole thing of looking, this craziness going on in Washington, D.C., what's going on here, and I started looking at it, and I didn't make the connection until I said, well, how can you, if integrity, you either have it or you don't at any particular time. It's binary, it's on or off. And you want it on most of the time. But when the critical times come, is it on when the critical time or not, okay? And only you know. You can PR yourself till the cows come home. There's a lot of politicians that are doing it all the time, right? Yes?
Would you be so kind to use an example, a solid example?
I'm sorry?
Would you be so kind to use an example, please, of a situation or
An example of
what you're saying about integrity and disempowerment, and could you use an example of maybe a situation, if possible? That'd be great.
You did. You said you can't say X or you'll lose my job.
Yeah, that's one.
But you might not have heard that.
You didn't hear it, okay. Yeah, it was just an example. I mean, something goes on in the office, and you know it isn't right, and you don't do anything about it because you might lose your job. It's inconvenience. Got to pay the mortgage that day or that month.
I didn't quite understand what you were saying earlier, because what I was hearing you say is that if you are in a situation and your child is throwing a fit and you say, stop crying and knock it off, that you're disempowering yourself. That's what I'm translating, but that's not what you're saying.
Okay, well, let me go on and see if it's clear, okay? And let's talk about child development, right? We talked about, there's some critical periods. One of the things that interested me when I was way back when was early childhood development. So I read Summerhill and all these interesting books, and there's a book which you might be interested in by Glenn Dolman, How to Teach Your Baby to Read. Anybody familiar with that? I think it's brilliant. Let me just take an aside for a moment and tell you about Glenn Dolman. How to Teach Your Baby to Read. Right. He was a physiologist during World War II, and he was part of a team that went to Europe after World War II with a bunch of sociologists, psychiatrists, MDs, and he was a physiologist, and their job was to take these orphans, wherever they came from, concentration camps or whatever, that were traumatized, terribly traumatized, physically, emotionally, and mentally, and their job was do the best job you can, help these kids. And he was amazed at how well they were able to do, and he said, if we can do this well with these kind of traumatized kids, what could we do with, a non-traumatized kid? And being a physiologist, he studied the brain, and he says these neurosynapses, and if we can just stimulate these little kids early, because you know how kids can learn languages like BAM, right? They get to be 8 years old, it's a little slower, get to be 16, it's slower still, 44, forget it, right? So, but it's because they're just there. They come out, they pop out of the womb, and oh, wow, this is interesting. They're doing this number, and they're stimulating all these neurosynapses. So he says, as soon as you can start reading to them, even in the womb, start reading to them, and then when they can see, make sure the print is big because their eyes are still developing, but write in big red letters, shoe, and show them a shoe. And by the way, add zapata, which is Spanish for shoe, too, and then maybe some word for Japanese shoe, and by the time you got kids 4 or 5 years old, they're speaking, reading, and writing 5, 6 languages. Not impossible at all, because you got them at that age where they're stimulated. So one of the points here is this is an incredibly stimulated, they can be stimulated. So the messages you give them is incredibly important, that it can help them expand in their creativity and allow their creativity, or you can suppress that because it's inconvenient for you in your busy schedule, and you do have busy schedules, and you got other kids and all those things, and you need some kind of boundaries. Nothing wrong with boundaries. Just be aware of how many you're putting in and which ones may be restricting some of that reach. Where the creativity is about reaching for new things. Leadership is about moving people into new territory. Now, that means change. Change always creates confusions, doubts, and fears. That's why change is so hard for individuals or organizations, because as soon as we get into change, I'm miserable anyway, but at least the devil I know, I'm more familiar with the devil I know than the devil I don't. So let's go back. Change is hard. Confusion, doubts, and fears. So you say, hey, you want to make this child more aware of what he needs to look at, educate him, yes, guide him, but don't disencourage him from starting to stretch. Another critical age in my studies 30 years ago, another critical age is around 7, 8. This is when there's kind of a shift. Males go to males, right? A kid wants 7, 8-year-old kids wants to wash the car with dad. And the girl wants to, get dressed up or whatever they do. I don't know, I'm not a girl, so with mom. Okay, so there's this connection. So, do you have time for a kid when they're 7 and 8? The male? I don't know. Be aware there's this need to bond, which teaches them what? How to connect and relate to another human being, rather than, if they don't get that, there's this distancing here, and that's what they use to relate to other people. So you just need to be aware of those dynamics. What's another critical stage? Puberty. I keep saying puberty. My wife said puberty. Puberty. Why? Change. Why? What's going on there? Major. What's major? Hormones kicking in all over the place, right? Right? Is that confusing to them? Yeah, right? And what else? What else? In addition to that going on, what tends to, you parents, will you tend to put onto those kids when they're going through that stage? Pardon me? Well, they move from this little girl or little boy, and now they look like little...
Bigger shoes.
Bigger shoes, they look more like a what? An adult. So what do you start imposing on them pretty quick? You need to be responsible. You got to grow up. Well, intuitively, hormonally, in every which way, they know that there's this shift here at this time, and all those hormones and all that chemistry is coming in, giving them the subconscious message, what? You got to make a break from this dependency of being a child into manhood, adulthood, womanhood, whatever, okay? They don't know how. They haven't had any experience. You know, and here's these parents imposing, they don't want to look bad, you know, you got to be socially acceptable, and remember, you got to get good grades so you can get into college, and all these kind of reminders of here's how you're supposed to behave, and then they look at their parents, and things are moving so rapidly, even more so now. Things are moving so rapidly that the parents, still caught in difficult with change, so do they tend to be a little more conservative? They do things the old way. How does the teenager look at dad? Are most dads with it or not? They're square. They're an embarrassment. They don't want you to be seen around them, right? You're an embarrassment. You're so fuddy. You're stupid. I got a dumb father. I got a dumb mother. They're stupid. Right? Right? So who understands? Maybe, but who really understands? Their peers. Peer group pressure is incredibly important. They're all wearing green hair. I gotta have green hair. I'll die if I don't have green hair, right? Whatever it is. Because why? They're in overwhelm. When they're in overwhelm, how do they feel secure, insecure? Do they feel they can handle life? Yes or no? They're overwhelmed, right? When they're overwhelmed, do they feel, here, up here, they have this, when they're up in this quadrant, they have a viewpoint like this. As they move down here, that viewpoint narrows like this, including their sense of ability to handle life, right? So as they're moving down here, when they're in that overwhelm, nobody understands. Do they feel part of a group? Even though peer group pressure is important, they're part of that. Do they feel really part of that? They're alone. They're incredibly lonely at this stage. Do any of you remember when you were a teenager? You tried all the green hair stuff. You still felt alone, right? So, education in the broadest sense of the word, as I mentioned before, is about expanding awareness. Your awareness and your sensitivity to people, yourself and people beyond you. This model is, I've studied, I don't know, I mean, I went through this whole stage, I think I related to you. I didn't know what the hell was going on. I felt incompetent and stupid. I felt dishonest because I was supposed to know something I didn't know, and I knew I didn't know it. But I didn't know what I should know, you know. So I spent all that time figuring out what is important for me. And in that model, I was running into political business things that were unethical, and I knew that. And when I realized there's a direct correlation between the level of integrity and the level of emotional maturity that you as an individual, as I as an individual, and as society as a group live at, you can predict the behavior. You can look at the behavior and tell what level of emotionality and integrity they're at. When somebody's acting like a Hitler and making all sorts of, why was Hitler successful? Look at Germany, World War I. They were defeated, right? The French imposed these incredible reparations on them. They had depths of a depression. First of all, they had a hyperinflation, unbelievable. You took a barrel of marks to literally buy a loaf of bread. And then they had a depression 4 times greater than this country. All right, where were they emotionally as a nation? What is somebody in apathy, if they're even willing to look, what do they want? Are they capable of handling anything themselves? So what is persuasive to them? Somebody who says, I can handle it. I know who the enemy is. I can smash him for you. You can? Heil Hitler. And they raised the people up. But Hitler was in chronic hostility, and leaders can't raise anybody above the level they're at. So he was incredibly persuasive by raising somebody, by communicating at a level that was real to him and saying, we can handle it. But since he was stuck there himself, guess where he stuck these people? He led them into a war of, let's fight the enemy. But it didn't keep moving them up. Great leadership operates with integrity, is able to understand how to relate and communicate to people at any level and move them up accordingly and keep moving them up until they're in a positive, constructive, responsible, healthy, loving area. That's great leadership. Hitler was not a great leader. I don't care how charismatic he was and how eloquent he was destructive. That means he was lacking in integrity. Great leadership I define as leadership with integrity. That only happens up here.
Do you have an example of a great leader?
I think Nelson Mandela. Gandhi. Pardon me? Martin Luther King, yeah. They led people up. Okay, let me show you how this works. Do we need a break?
Going back to the teenagers, if I'm trying to relate your explanation to the teenagers. If you are trying to teach them something new, because obviously they don't know everything, but they tell you, I know. So what do we do when that situation?
Listen. One of the most important things when teenagers are in this arena, you got to appreciate them. Appreciate them for the wonder they are, for the creative genius they are. Put your attention on their strengths, not on how they're overwhelmed and screwing up. It's about appreciation of what they are. Just appreciate them. Just make an effort. How can I appreciate my son, my daughter today? Wow, I feel get that connection going. It's appreciation and gratitude that does it. You're grateful that he's in your household. Not that he's screwing up and taking keys and running off with the car and stealing $20 out of your purse, which he'll do when he's overwhelmed. When he's below the line, they'll do those things. So deal with it. Not by suppressing him, by just understanding and saying, let's have a talk about this. And don't say, You got to learn to be responsible. Yeah, he's got to learn to be responsible, but that's not the way to get it across. Am I making any sense? Yes, ma'am.
Well, I could use myself as an example.
All right.
So I have an 18-year-old and I work with kids too, little kids ages 2 to 12. And one of the things that my 18-year-old said to me, well, he's now 18, and when he was 16, he started to say to me, "Mom, you're repeating yourself. I just can't stand it when you repeat yourself." And I thought to myself, well, so what you can't stand it? I mean, in the back of my head, so what you can't stand that I'm repeating myself, it's what you need to know. But the truth was that all he wanted to do was be heard. And for a year and a half, I fought with myself, knowing that I'm a good parent, knowing that I work with kids, and knowing that, my God, this is the right thing to do for this 18-year-old, or the 17-year-old. And at some point, I finally gave it up. And because I got so frustrated that everything that I said he wasn't listening to anyway, and he kept saying the same thing. You're not listening to me. You're repeating yourself. And when I gave it up, when I finally gave it up, when I stopped, when I listened to what he was telling me, and I stopped repeating myself, and I started listening and repeating what he had said to me, all of a sudden, he turned around.
Give that lady a hand. That's a key point here. If you walk away with nothing else this evening, listen to your kids. And frankly, you're probably going to be screwing up on it because you don't do it very well. You need some practice. It's about keeping your mouth shut mainly. Right?
I call it being in allowance.
Yeah, that's another, yeah. Allowing their flow, as crazy as it may be at times. They need in order to get out of the craziness, what do they need to do with the flow? They need to let it flow. When you say, no, you can't do that, that's stuffing it. That's just, it's just going to pop up somewhere else in spades. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I agree, I see that, therefore, how do you, when they really can't do that, how do you set that boundary in such a way it doesn't squash them, but I'm sorry, no, you don't have a license and you're not taking my car.
Yeah, it's about learning about balance and boundaries. Boundaries are needed. But we've been too automatic on them, and we've got too much into what we learned from our parents that maybe were relevant then, maybe not, maybe even relevant for you, but are they relevant now? So take a look, be more discerning on what boundaries you're putting in. Are you on automatic with those boundaries or not? And some boundaries are appropriate, right? We live in a physical universe with boundaries. We need to be aware of them, but not in a non-thinking way. I mean, you're bright people. You wouldn't be living in California if you weren't, right? Let me go over these dynamics, if you will. All right. Here's some of the emotions. Can everybody see these? Are they bold enough? Okay. Each is a message. To the degree, this is how expansive they are. How big. When you're up here, you're much more capable of getting in touch with that unlimited potential you have, that other 99% you haven't been using. So your goal is to start doing what you can responsibly and consciously with greater awareness of moving, recognizing where you are, acutely or chronically. Where do I live? It's not about denial. Change is, remember, change. What's the first step to change? Recognize where I am. Am I bummed out? Am I in apathy? Do I live in grief? Do I live in fear? Or, am I kind of more in this neutral zone here? Am I in relative contentment? By the way, contentment's a dangerous state. Especially for people who have worked their way up and they got out all this hostility and the suppressive environments. I got friends that were raised in barrios and stuff and ghettos, and they really had to struggle, and they did. They made it out here, and it was like such a relief, and they got into contentment, and it was like, this is so good. But I said, hey, you got to keep going. Because life is about change. And you're either growing or you're contracting. You can't stand still. You got to keep growing. So if you stay in contentment, which is very seductive, you'll find yourself going down. You'll drop into boredom. And what is boredom? Boredom's a message. Sorry. Boredom's a message that you need a bigger game. Okay, anybody? Who's bored here? Anybody? You need a bigger game. How can you challenge yourself to stretch? Get into, okay? You need a bigger game. Okay. So each of these here. Now here's what I've come up with 6 levels. I mean, Ken Wilber has 7 levels. Different. Those are arbitrary. My 6 levels are arbitrary. The only reason I put those in, because in my travels around the world over the last 35, 40 years, I saw people behave at certain levels. And they made sense to me. And so I got what I call level 6, which is what I call the true leader. Incredibly expansive. Big picture. Then I got what I call the doer, who's kind of in this range. That overlap. That's the doer. These are the people that in this society are highly relied. They're doing, man. They're going out there, they're making money, they're producing stuff. Not quite as big a picture. They tend to be more conservative, more money motivated. Than these people have more of a combination of financial success and balanced spiritual success. There's a balance there. This is where true balance comes in. Balance starts to go out as we move down, even above the levels. Then we got the next level, that's 3. And then that's 4, excuse me. And then we got this 3, which is the anger. And then we got the most dangerous one of all, this very narrow one. This is the passive-aggressive manipulator. This is the dangerous one. Why? Why is that the most dangerous in this society? In any society?
You don't see them coming.
Pardon me?
You don't see them coming.
Well, yeah, it's covert, which means it's hidden. Is it hostile? Yeah. It's hostile. And actually, it's got enough energy to go out there and do something and get you. They're going to screw you. This is the level of the con man. This is the level of criminality, something for nothing. Exchange. You can look at, as we move down these levels, exchange gets skewed. People get their exchange in. They give value for value. They're not going to get that last dime out of you. People down here are going to get the last dime out of you. I can get it. What Gordon Gekko said. Why'd he do it? Because I could. Didn't think of anybody else, but he could. Right? Talk about arrogance. By the way, arrogance, you ever meet anybody that's arrogant? Have you ever been arrogant a little bit yourself once in a while? I have. I've been known for it. Right? It's fear-based. Why would you be arrogant? Because you're afraid of something. You're covering up something. Meet anybody that's arrogant, they're covering up something. Watch out. Might be some passive-aggressive stuff going on there, could do you some damage. Now, I'm going to come back to this. let me talk about reality for a second. You have my friend Steve over here. Steve's a really good guy, and he's got a big reality. This is Steve Daly, right? And here's me. I'm not quite as big as him, but I'm gonna. So that's how I realize. This is everything he sees and perceives is all his considerations, fixed ideas, biases, prejudices, brilliance, everything, and so is mine. Where are we going to be able to communicate? The overlap. Here's my wife, Dee. Are we going to be able to communicate over here? With difficulty, I can guarantee you. We're great over here, but she says, I just don't get it when she's over here. I just don't get it. And she's right. And we can get into a whole bunch of make wrongs about that, but it's just a different in perception and reality. We all have them. And when we have little management by committee, there are a few out here and a few down there. And you wonder why anything, which usually doesn't, get done in committee, right? Finally, somebody who's more authoritarian comes in and says, we're doing this. And then somebody says, thanks, the committee's over, thank God. And it's somebody who's willing to just go ahead and do it and break some social norm and be criticized for it, right? So it's somebody who has to, when they see craziness go on, and you know you got to do something, you know if you do something, you're going to get criticized. Because you're upsetting somebody's little, comfortable little pattern. It's called leadership. You can do it well, you can do it poorly, you can do it angrily, you can do it all sorts of ways. But let me show you some ways that might facilitate how you do it. So, it so happens on this scale here, you can only relate to somebody wherever they are within one integer on that scale. It's emotional distance apart. You go too far away from there emotionally, you're like out there on the moon, okay? You don't understand. Okay, let me go back here. We got, here's me, and here's you, and if I try to communicate to you, here's you, or I'll make you bigger, okay? You, okay? If I try to communicate over here, I'm too far away from you emotionally to be able to relate. I'm out of your range of emotional reality. Or any kind of reality. Does that make sense? So if I want to communicate, I got to figure out where this overlap is. And the emotional hierarchy of emotions is an incredibly powerful and useful tool to do that figuring, to help you rather than just guessing or whatever, okay? So there's one. So if somebody is in anger here, let's get another one here. If somebody is, sorry, just pick a point. Pick a contentment. If somebody's in contentment, what's the widest range that I can communicate, plus or minus? Pardon me? One integer. No, one integer. One number on this scale. Okay, so here, by the way, at 1.8 is pain. P-A...
Say that's one whole number. You need to explain integer.
Oh, one whole number, sorry. Okay, here's just for 1.8 is pain, physical, emotional, mental pain. That is why, have you ever had a headache? and your child turns on the television real loud, and it hurts. Shut off that TV, right? You're in anger and antagonism because you're in, well, that's opinion, you're in that range, okay? It hurts. Okay, so if somebody's at 2.8, what's 3.8 here? Is that right? Right here. So what's 1.8. This is what will be emotionally real to somebody in contentment. They can't really relate to somebody in fear. It's out of their reality. It's like, oh yeah, I guess they're hurting. That is why it's so important for you to go through all of these to actually experience them, including the pain, the fear, the grief, the apathy. So if you want to communicate with somebody, you can have some empathy. To be able to relate and have rapport with where they are. If you've never had the experience, or you've had the experience but suppressed it, you don't have that ability to relate. Does that make sense? Including with your kid. If you were numbed out through your childhood because whatever your parents did, you have a lesser ability to relate to your kids. And you're modeling that for their kids. So this can be an opportunity to really take a look at, where have I been? How have I allowed myself to be stuck? And today is the first day of the rest of your life. Right? And you are brilliant, incredibly powerful beings who have been suppressing yourself all your life. Some of you know that. Most of you don't. Consider it. You can change anything you want right now. And if you say you can't, you're being a victim. And where's that on the scale? It's way down there. Okay. So you can only relate within one integer of this scale. So if we can divide this up in those zones, rather than having 4, if you say, okay, I know he's in zone 6, or he's in zone 4 over here, whatever it is, if I can communicate, I want to raise him up. I want to communicate within his reality or her reality range, but slightly above them, to be a model of more positive energy, of a bigger picture. If I can communicate on the next level, I'll probably be able to be within his reality level and create that positive energy that draws people up. That's what Hitler did to a country in apathy. He raised them up to the next hostile level, 2 levels up. But he didn't keep going and stuck him there. And that's destructive for him, everybody else associated with that. So a key to leadership, if you're going to deal with people down here, you got to make sure you stick with it till you get them above that line. Otherwise, you're just going to stimulate a lot of negative energy here. Whether you're a teacher, I don't care, whether you're a teacher, manager, whatever position you're in. Yes, ma'am.
Ed, could you give us an example of how the scale works with a child who is, say, under 5, and a child who is in middle childhood, so 7, 8, 9, 10, and a teenager? If you give us those 3 examples.
Well, there's really fundamentally.
Now, give an example of how this works with those 3 age differences.
But they're all the same, because we're dealing with emotions here. If the teenager's down here in anger, if the little kid's in anger, the same kind of, you may use different words and different vocabulary, and he may have a different experience that you can really, but that's just context that you put on top of the emotional level. Is that clear? This scale is universal, cross-cultural, cross-gender, cross-context. I've used this in Beijing, in Jakarta, in Budapest, in Quito, Ecuador, in Sonoma.
If my son is angry, how do I bring him up to boredom.
Okay. Exactly. Exactly. Well, I don't want to bring up the boredom or let's stick him in angry. No. Okay. Okay, he's angry. What's characteristics of anger? What's he doing?
Throwing things.
He's doing destructive things. He's probably blaming somebody else for something else, right? He's saying nasty things. He's doing things that aren't acceptable. And he's generalizing his hostility. That's anger. Okay? So he's thought, you're always doing this. Well, give me a specific. Well, I can't give you a specific. Watch out when they stick in anger like that. What do you want to do? What's the character? You want to look at what these characteristics are. Anger is generalized hostility. You want to first, before you move him to boredom or neutral, you want to first move him to, which is focused hostility. What can you do within that context to get him more focused? Don't make him wrong. It is what it is, right? He's angry. He's got anger. You got to get that released in a safe way. So you want to let that generalized comments, tell me more. Give me more.